Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lagosians podcast for episode 2 of the Lion in the Ring series. I'm here today with Dylan Alexander, who is working hard on the other part of the Lion in the Ring series, which is he's going to be helping walk us through the Narniad of C.S. Lewis. So how is prep for that going, and how are you feeling about it?
Well, I did it all today because I like to procrastinate until the last possible second.
Good man, good man.
Yeah.
Well, we're excited to get to that when we do. Then we have Derek Johnson is here with us today, the T-ball coach extraordinaire, and just a real
2-0, by the way.
Yeah, 2-0. Yeah, there are actually two men in the MLB right now who played for his team and give him credit. They credit him greatly for their success.
Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds.
Yeah, specifically. You've been actually reading through the Silmarillion a little bit.
And listening.
Yeah, and listening along with it. You're a little bit further ahead, though. Actually, a lot. You said you're like chapter 15, correct?
Yes.
So
let me check that.
So some of this,
Which is of the Noldor in Beleriand, by the way.
good stuff. So we are going to be doing quite a bit of review for you, but that's going to be fine. I'm excited to get back to the very beginning of it. And then we have Charlie, who is fresh off of an elders retreat. That's exciting, huh?
Oh yeah, it was exciting and I'm tired, so glad to be here.
Charlie was granted. Well, there's a long running joke that Charlie was granted this position primarily because of what the scriptures call his crown of wisdom, which is his head of gray hair. And I'd just like to publicly say that is not the case at all. He actually has family on the board, and that's super deserving, and he's going to be adding a lot, or going to continue to add a lot to our podcast that we have here. So I'm excited to get back into it, and here we go. Today we're starting officially into the Silmarillion, which is quite dense, but is just wonderful in its depth and in the things that it explores. I would like to, if you guys don't mind, start off by just getting the takes of specifically Derek and Charlie, who are somewhat new to this text. I know, Derek, you've been reading in it for a little bit now, so you've read through it once. Charlie, I know you're new to this. I'll just say this from the very beginning. What are your general thoughts? And I'll just lead with this. Do you feel like you already kind of get the sense of why not as many people read this?
Starting out for me, like when I first started listening to the audiobook of it, it's like learning another language.
Yeah.
It's something that's brand new. It's not like
Pretty fitting, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So yeah, I just feel like I'm in a learning curve for this new world and area, right? So then that's really the thing. So because all of a sudden there are tons of new words and names and stuff real quick that I'm like, okay, clearly there's some sort of connection to a creation account, but like I don't know quite what all these words or what's going to go on. So yeah, it's just like learning a new language.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, it's so rich in names that you've never heard before, that it just has like, it is like learning a new language, which is fitting for Tolkien because he had such an obsession with words and language, being a philologist.
Yeah.
And, for anyone that's like really struggling, if they were trying to read along with us, really like the best thing to do is to just read it again. I mean, listening to us talk about it obviously will be helpful, but just read it again and like it'll start to seem like there's less names. There's not like 1,000 things that you've never heard before. And then the characters will start to take shape in your mind.
For sure. Sorry, the reason why I started giggling right there is because I noticed in my peripheral vision that Charlie and I took a drink of coffee in unison, so I already know that Tim's going to edit us.
We just did that a second ago.
Did you?
Yeah, so this time it's going to be me and him. And then
So this
you
is actually a
and
great
Charlie.
time to give a shout out to the fifth Lagosian, who is actually Tim. He's the one responsible for all the awesome graphics and things that you'll be seeing, as well as he's our chief video editor that we have, and you'll be seeing him on the podcast in the future, I'm sure. But he is going to have a field day with a lot of the stuff that we're doing. But we very much appreciate him. He is the unsung hero of the Lagosians podcast. But anyways, back to the Silmarillion. What do you have to say about that, Derek? Do you feel like what sets this apart just from a more superficial level to you?
I mean, yeah, so it's a very thick book, even in the short amount of words that he uses to describe certain things.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very. He doesn't use a lot of layman terms or like a lot of layman speech. It's very like, yeah. Like there's been a few words where I'm like, oh, I can't remember what that means, so I have to Google it.
Well, this is also being written by not only was he an intellectual just colossus, but he's also an intellectual colossus from another time.
Yeah.
Language was different then, and another country. We're also not
Englishman.
Yeah, we're not exactly Englishmen or whatever, especially not from that time period.
But,
so
another thing about it is, like, his intention when he set out to write the whole Legendarium of Middle-earth, was that it was like a prehistory for England, and this, like, the Ainulindale, I don't remember the letter that I read it in, but, like, his intention initially was that this would be, like, another creation account that was found in England, 1,000-something years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's written kind of like if you're trying to read a translation of some old Greek legends and stuff like that. So it's intentional that it's that way.
And it goes without saying that most people aren't used to reading things like that. So that alone kind of answers the question of like, well, why is it that people often struggle with reading the Silmarillion? Well, it's not your typical book. It's not written as a novel that has a very precise, narrative where it's set up. Like this would struggle to get. This would struggle to get through a publishing house.
And it did.
Yeah, well, originally it definitely did, but I mean, it finally got through, and Christopher Tolkien was able to get it through. But yeah, it's very different, even among Tolkien's other works, which I think is very interesting. And yet, within it are encapsulated like so many of the best stories in all of Middle-earth's history. Well, I say Middle-earth, it's not just Middle-earth, it's actually things we're going to explore, which is you have Middle-earth, you have Beleriand, and then you also have Valinor. And all of these places that we're going to be exploring as we go through this work together. But yeah, we have dove in, and we're going to continue to do it. So we're starting off with chapter 1, which is called the Ainulindale, or the Song of the Ainur. This book is really, from my interpretation and from my many readings through it, really split into 4 separate parts, and that's kind of how I like to dissect it. The first part is just specifically something I just call the Ainur and their music. What you were hinting at early, Derek, is important. Clearly, music is a very important theme to Tolkien. Even somebody who hasn't necessarily read the books can pick that up even in the films, like the amount of care and time that is spent on scores and songs that take place in the movies. Anybody who does even a casual reading of the books will find out that actually they didn't even hit, it's not even a drop in the bucket. His pages are just completely filled with poems and songs, and randomly almost you'll have main characters or primary characters just break out into ballads that they write on the spot. Music meant a lot to this guy, which I think goes hand in hand with why he incorporates music as the primary source, the primary mechanism by which Eru, who is God in this story, brings everything into being. So it starts off beautifully. In the very beginning of the story, it starts off, it says, "So there was Eru, the one, who in Arda is called Iluvatar. And he made first the Ainur, the holy ones, that were the offspring of his thought. And they were with him before aught else was made, and he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music. And they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only that part of the mind of Iluvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came deeper into understanding and increased in unison and in harmony." So, first of all, you'll notice immediately the prose. It's very much like what you just said, Dylan. It sounds like a translation of something that somebody would have found from an old, a creation account of a bygone era. And it's very intentionally written that way, as you said.
Right. In this case, it would be Quenya.
Yeah, exactly. So Quenya is one of the 2 elven languages that he had fully fleshed out, that being Tolkien, which Quenya and then Sindarin. Which are the 2 primary languages that a lot of the things in these stories are named after, actually, or they come from that language. Once again, taking a step back to the introduction, this guy literally created a world so that his languages could inhabit. It's just absolutely nuts. So if you're reading through a lot of these names and words and you're like, what is this? What language is this? Does this come from? Well, it's because it's from a made up language. Now it's inspired by a lot of things, but yeah, it's pretty much made up. But even from the very beginning there, and I know you guys and us as a group have read through the whole first chapter, but even from these opening lines, what are some similarities that you guys see? And I know this may be a bit of an obvious question, but where are you seeing the similarities between the concept of Eru, Iluvatar, and the God of the Bible?
I think that so part of it, even with the music, and I think that it goes back to like some arguments that we have for the existence of God, like when we talk about like grounding morality and even grounding beauty, which I know that that's controversial, but in it, it's saying that even the music basically is basically grounded in Iluvatar, which that's probably how I'm going to refer to.
That's fine. that is just fine.
No, how do you say it?
So the layman would typically pronounce it Iluvatar, and that's what typically, like when Dylan and I are referring to or talking to each other about it, that's how we would say it. Okay. But yeah, I understand that Martin Shaw in the audiobook or whatever, you'll hear him say Iluvata is how he will say it.
So it's primacy because that's what I first heard. But yeah, because now it's hard for me to say it like you guys are saying it. But Iluvatar. So if I say Iluvatar, it's Iluvatar. Is how you guys are. Okay, same guy.
It's not. Neither is incorrect necessarily. So I know when you say it, I'll know who you're talking about for sure.
So anyway, but that's what I find interesting is like even that, like even like whenever all this chaos and stuff ends up happening, even the music basically ultimately is grounded in Iluvatar. Yeah. And so that's just another one of those interesting things comparison to arguments for the existence of God and stuff like that.
Right, and then it kind of says in there when it's talking about the Ainur that each one of them only understood the theme from the part of the mind of Iluvatar.
Right.
From which they came. This whole idea that they all are kind of proceeding forth from the mind of God.
And this is a common theme throughout the rest of this chapter is actually that and of course and Eru will say it in a open statement later on in the chapter where he would basically identify that there is no theme that cannot have its uttermost source in him. Basically the only right and good things will always come from him, which that's directly of the Judeo-Christian ethic right there. So just to take a step back, we've already made reference to these people who are called the Ainur that we just identified. So these are essentially angelic beings that are basically that pre-exist the world, and they are the focus of this chapter. So when you hear the word Ainur, essentially just think of angels if you're having trouble keeping up with all of this.
Well, and later on, he even changes the name from Ainur to Valar or Valar.
Yeah,
I don't know, but it has a slightly different meaning.
It does.
Oh wait, that's what ends up happening is the Ainur. The name changes?
No, the Ainur is just like a broader term.
Yeah.
Within the Ainur, there's the Valar and the Maiar.
Yeah.
So the Valar are like the higher rank archangels, if you will.
Okay.
And then the Maiar are underneath them. Usually, like each Valar has a retinue of Maiar that serve with them, and so on.
Yeah. So think of it like this. So the Ainur are just angels. The Valar are the angels that actually enter into the world, which is called Ea. So basically, imagine there's a heavenly host of Ainur. A select number of them enter into the world and essentially become a pantheon that becomes known as the Valar. The Valar is just known as the powers. That's what that means. So essentially, they just become like an earthly pantheon of gods, so to speak, lowercase god, so to speak. Early on, also in the chapter, we get allusions to this thing that Eru wields, has, or maybe there's other things, called the sacred fire or the flame imperishable. What does this make you guys think of specifically, and like what purpose does it serve in this story? Specifically within the Ainulindale itself. Do you guys recall this?
I don't recall that. I mean, it sounds familiar, but I don't remember delving on it too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like it's the breath of life, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The Holy Spirit.
The eternal. I don't know. I guess you could say the eternal flame of just the breath that God or Eru puts in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, breath being one of the translations of the Greek word pneuma, which we would use for spirit. So the Holy Spirit, in a way, or it's like this fire of life that kind of holds all of everything together.
Yeah. And so not just the fire of life, but specifically the fire of like free life. So free will is also in the story bound up in the idea of the secret fire or the flame imperishable. He specifically speaks to a time when he would give to their minds the secret fire. And you see how they were brought forth from this. And this actually explains how these angelic beings, though constantly in the presence of Eru and making music before Eru, are actually free to express this music in whichever way that they find. And that ends up being a beautiful thing, but also a problematic thing, as we'll find as well. The Ainur don't immediately receive direction from Eru, it doesn't seem. It seems like there's an inexplicably long time where the Ainur together are just, it says, freely using their abilities together, learning from one another, and then together working in collaboration with each other, which is another huge theme of this opening chapter, I believe. Specifically, as it relates to the one of the Ainur who actually doesn't do this, which is named Melkor. He is actually the first of the Ainur who is named in this story. It says that to Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all of the gifts of his brethren, which I think is interesting. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame. For desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own. And it seemed to him that now you got me messed up.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Say it properly.
It seemed to him that Iluvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Iluvatar. In that statement alone, I feel like that's very telling. So, like, what is the sin of Melkor ultimately? It seems like there's a couple of things there in even that passage I just read.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he's wanting to generate or create life in the same form of fashion as Iluvatar, right? He's wanting some sort of co-equal, like, recognition that, he's just as much, I guess, as a life giver as he is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but like an independence, and that's because the whole theme about the music that the Ainur are making is that they're all able to sub-create and freely act on their own, but in accord with Eru's plan.
Right.
And yet he, is looking out and saying, like, I want to do my own thing.
And is he not also directly, basically implying that he wants to do it better? Because he says he looks out into the void and is impatient of its emptiness. So basically, he looks out into the things that are not made yet, and looks at Iluvatar as like, "What are you doing?"
So it's like looking out and being like, "Look at all this wasted space that you're not using." And so
Exactly.
so then that does make me think of when you have like scientists and stuff even now that are just like, "Oh, God if a God existed, would he just leave all this space out there with no other life, for instance? Like, what's he doing?"
Right.
Yeah, I see that.
And I think the last thing, and probably the most important theme, no pun intended, once again, theme is a word that's used a lot here, of this fall of Melkor, that literally runs as a thin, like a thread that goes through all of Tolkien's works, is actually, I think, pointed out in this line. He had often gone alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame. So, a continuous theme in these works is the importance of fellowship, of not being a lone wolf type person. Melkor displays this tendency over and over again, and it manifests itself with him not being in theme with Iluvatar because he's not in theme with his brethren. So I think that's another really really cool theme that we're going to see in all of Tolkien's work, that the man who walks alone is often the story of someone who walks in tragedy, and it just never ends well. But it is actually he who finds companions and strives to walk with them is the person who actually comes out on top. So fellowship is actually a big theme of Tolkien's work, and I think that's an amazing thing. So after this thing is given, after a period of time where the Ainur are working in collaboration with each other, they're experimenting with their different abilities of how they can make music to the delight of Iluvatar. Iluvatar basically steps up and declares for the first time a theme. He says, "And it came to pass that Iluvatar called together all of the Ainur and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than they had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Iluvatar and were silent. Then Iluvatar said to them, Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that you make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will." So that goes back to what we just talked about this being this flame imperishable being not just life, but actually free will within beings. "But I will sit and hearken and be glad that through you the great beauty has been wakened into song." Hey everybody, we hope you enjoyed the video so far. Be sure to tune in next time for the rest of it. Until then, find us on your favorite social media pages and on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you guys. And until then, we bid you a very fond farewell.
Y'all think I got this all figured out, but man, nah.